Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome once again to the Sunday edition of the Homer and Hater Show. Well, it's always on Sundays. You will not be seeing Lance Williams today. He is off on personal assignment, and Michael Beck is going to step into maybe the hater role. We'll just see. But you really can't hate too much of Michael Beck with him wearing that really cool jersey. Mike, show that off, my friend.
Oh yeah, here we go. We're rocking that TJ Watt Pro Bowl jersey today. Just a really clean version of it. I'm super glad the AFC didn't end up wearing that kind of gross mustardy yellow, faded yellow jersey that the NFC wore, because I definitely wouldn't have got it if that was the case. But when I saw them rocking these, it's like, oh, if that comes online, I think I'm gonna have to spend a couple of these Canadian dollars, which will run up the bank card. But yeah, no, very happy.
You're always saying Canadian dollars. We feel for you, man. I am rocking just a Steelers shirt from the XL Super Bowl XL collection. I had purchased so many shirts that I just put away. And after that Super Bowl, I have about 12 t-shirts that I just put away and I never wore. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna start breaking some of these out, because what am I gonna do with them? So this is one of the official Reebok t-shirts from then. And as I always like to sport my Steelers stuff, the other day I was wearing just a blue shirt and I felt pretty bad. And Michael made me feel bad. Dave made me feel bad. So it was a really nice martini t-shirt, martini button down cabana wear type Kramer shirt, but I took it off and I rocked the Steelers. So with that being said, we're glad to hang out with you on a Sunday or whenever you're listening to this show on the BTSC family of podcasts, featuring none other than myself, Michael Beck, Lance Williams, Tony Defio, and don't forget the editor behind the Steel Curtain, Dave Schofield. His brother Rich also joins in on the Stat Geek as well. So Dave's already in the live chat saying, I didn't say a word. So it's all on you, Michael. He's throwing you under the bus. Is there or what do they have in Canada? Do they have something, other kind of transportation besides a bus?
Well, typically we just ride a moose to school, but
I am learning so much. Well, I don't know whether they call it a trolley or whether it was a certain name.
That's like Australian and like, yeah, I don't know about
in San Francisco. I mean,
okay, yeah, but that is
trolleys and yeah, so you never know. So you may, oh my gosh, you might be getting the nickname Moose. So we can't do that. So with that being said, let's get into the show. And I am so excited about the fact that we've been talking so much about Ben Roethlisberger lately, and Ben Roethlisberger coming back with a host of weapons. Now, some may say that, and they're saying that the season really hinges on the fact that Ben Roethlisberger needs to stay healthy, and that is a given, and we all know that. But if you go forward and look at all the weapons he has, it's great to have, but does he have too many weapons? Now, we're not going to throw away any of the weapons. We're glad. But are there enough balls to go around, especially at a certain position? And that position that we're talking about this year is one that definitely needed an upgrade and definitely got an upgrade, and that's the tight end position. Michael Beck, let's talk about those tight ends.
Right. With the addition of Eric Ebron, I think we were all surprised in just a really good way, especially when that contract came through. Of course, he battled that ankle injury that he shut himself down. Whether or not what side, I guess we tend to believe it, if it was the Colts or with him. Of course, there was a little bit of animosity there, but there was that divorce there, and Pittsburgh got the benefit of the doubt here and got one of the best tight ends in 2018 on a really good deal. And then, of course, incumbent Vance McDonald, just, I guess, one of the greatest highlights in the last, half decade. That stiff arm on Chris Conti is going to be played over and over. Of course, his birthday was just yesterday, so happy birthday, yes, Vance. And that highlight will be played forever anytime you talk about Mr. One Vanimal Vance McDonald. So, going into this year, they have some depth at a position where have they ever had a number two like as solid? I'd say Vance is probably that number two guy right now. Has there ever been a guy that kind of good as a number two tight end? Even Heath Miller didn't really have a running mate that was outside of a block first guy. So it'll be a really interesting year with the talent and the skills of this tight end group.
That is definitely for sure. So let's stop and talk about that first thing that you said about you're not sure what side of the coin, what side to believe as far as Ebron and the Colts, that messy divorce. Now, here's something that I can say. I actually don't have a lot of respect for the Indianapolis Colts as far as a franchise goes. Now, what they've done, and especially in the Peyton Manning years, I really appreciate what Peyton Manning did there. And, you had Reggie Wayne, of course, you had Marvin Harrison, you had Jeff Saturday. You really had some great players there. But as far as an organization goes, I didn't like the way that they treated Peyton Manning on the way out. I just didn't feel that it was like, all right, what have you done for me lately? Boom. And then he's gone. I understand it's a business, but there's a lot of things about the Colts that I just don't. I think it's a rinky-dink operation, and it starts with the owner, Mr. Irsay. I just think, and you got to understand, I'm a Maryland resident. I was not a Maryland resident. I was a Pennsylvania resident on March 30th of 1984 when they just completely jerked over Baltimore and the state of Maryland. And really, us here as a Steeler fan, I feel like they jerked us over when they loaded everything into a Mayflower truck and took off in the middle of the night and broke the heart of that team. Because when you think about it, that could very well happen to any franchise. Luckily, the Steelers have owners like the Rooneys that you don't worry about that as much. But the reason I feel like it affected the Steelers organization, could you imagine right now a rivalry that was the Steelers and the Colts? That would be, to me, that would be an all-time greater rivalry, one than what you have now. Even though you have a great rivalry with the Ravens, but you just don't have to look at the black and purple. That's the first thing. And the other thing that you look at is the fact that I mean, it goes back forever to the 1950s because you had the Colts. You can even look back at the fact that the Colts, Johnny Unitas was a Steeler, and we were dumb enough to let him go. There's so many things there. So a lot of people are mentioning different names, different great Colts. Edgerrin James is one of them, and of course, how good Edge was. There's a lot of guys that I could have probably said so many more. Bob Sanders, I could have brought up. I could have brought up guys on that offensive line even more. So yeah, there's so many. But as far as everything goes, it's just a franchise that when I look at the 32 as a whole, I'm not ranking them as far as decision makers up there. So when I'm saying that they're saying that Ebron shut it down, Ebron wasn't healthy. He shut it down. But the bottom thing to look at, the bottom line, when you look at this whole thing, Michael Beck, or the Steelers do good diligence. They have some of the best personnel in the game. Are they going to go ahead and waste time bringing in a guy like Ebron if they don't think that he is a good addition and if they think he is going to be a cancer in that locker room? I don't think they are.
You know what? I will play the other side of that coin, because if you look at that deal, I think one of the main reasons Ebron was brought in is because he got that bond with Big Ben at that I believe it was a church retreat where they met. And you know what? If Big Ben obviously has a huge influence on this team and how players are kind of brought in. And if he whispers in Kevin Colbert's ear, like, I need this guy, and he's willing to come cheaper because he wants to play with me. And then you look at that deal, it's essentially a 1-year deal. If he isn't anything but spectacular, he could quite easily be cut this offseason. So even if he is a diva, he might not even make it through the season. So I think it is a very low risk contract for a player that the quarterback wanted. So in that sense, I feel like it's a boom or bust player. Eric Ebron, if he can do what he did in 2018, he might even get another deal this coming offseason, just because that $8 million cap hit might sting a little bit next year. But yeah, I think he's only on the books for $2 million this year. It is very low risk for the Steelers. If he can do what he has done, then I don't think it'll matter. They've hit some pretty big egos in the past, so it'll be interesting when it's all said and done to hear maybe some stories from some other players on the way out. But I think this side, it's more of a case of this contract is just so unbelievably one-sided for the Steelers. They can so easily get out of it. They're kind of turning a blind eye on the other stuff.
And the funny thing about this contract, it is the second highest unrestricted free agent contract in Pittsburgh Steeler history, bringing somebody in. And I believe the first, if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be Steven Nelson. Yep. And because, that's where we are. I mean, you have to look at the economics of right now. But when they made that deal, all of us at Behind the Steel Curtain, fans around the globe, we're looking at this like, really? That's all you spent on Eric Ebron? 2 days before they brought Eric Ebron in, here's me saying, there's no way they're going to bring this guy in. Forget about Eric Ebron. They're not going to be able to afford this guy. He's going to command more money. But because of what the Colts were saying on the other side, because he did not have the same year that he did the year before, he had a down year in 2019, there was talk. But look at who his quarterbacks were. Jacoby Brissett, who I like. Brian Hoyer, who I like. But had no time to really get on the same page with them. When he was on the field with Andrew Luck, an elite quarterback at that point, I mean, you might argue that, but he's an elite quarterback. And when he was on the field with Andrew Luck, he thrived to the point, and we know these numbers. We've heard them ad nauseum. 110 targets, 66 catches, 750 yards, and 13 touchdowns. So, red zone threat. Michael Beck, my question to you is, Eric Ebron's not the only red zone threat, and that makes the Steelers so much more dangerous as well, don't you think?
This team honestly is a matchup nightmare. Like, whether people are realizing it or not, everyone on this offense seems to have some sort of size, or one of those just absolute shifty guys in Deontay Johnson, who, if he's not getting those number one corners, he's going to just dangle some guys and he's going to be wide open. When they get down in the red zone, they got some beasts like Chase Claypool. We can't forget about him. He is every bit of that 6'4" frame, and he's jumping out of the gym. Eric Ebron's, I believe, the same size, but like 20 pounds heavier. So who are you going to – do you have two box-out defenders on every single defense in the NFL? I don't think that's the case with most teams. So there are going to be some guys that are just going to get some unbelievable looks. I think these running backs will reap the benefits the most, just because of who they're going to have out on the field. Like, it can't all just be D linemen and linebackers, because there's way too many targets just to throw those corner fades, which I think we're going to see a ton of. But I think defense are going to have to spread out even in the red zone, just allowing guys like James Conner, Benny Snell, these downhill runners. Hell, even Derek Watt. I think he's someone who could just pound the ball in the end zone because it's going to be open. So whether or not they actually get the stats, I think their impact on the team will be felt, especially in that red or green zone, whatever you're calling it. But these guys are legit, and they're going to scare some teams. So I really like the mismatch aspect of all this. But it'll be interesting to see where those touchdowns actually fall, and who's going to, when the season's all said and done, who's going to have those numbers. Because I think it's just going to fall on one guy's shoulders, who ends up just getting a stupid amount of targets because they're just getting the easier matchups.
Now, there is a question here, and the live chat is answering it, but I do think that we do have to bring this up. Thaddeus Kennedy, 110 targets and 65 catches. How many drops did he have? I was getting ready to look that up. Dave Shipley, another great contributor to our show, says 16 drops. So that's something that I was going to go ahead and look up while I was speaking. But my multitasking problems that I have. So thank you, fellas, for going ahead and bringing that up. You can live with 16 drops. I don't have a problem with that. That's something that drops are going to happen in this league. You're going to have, and especially when you're a tight end, I mean, that does happen, but you're still going to have a lot of opportunities in the red zone with him. And you're going to have a lot of opportunities with Vance McDonald. Vance McDonald has had drops as well. But however, when Vance McDonald is on the field with Ben Roethlisberger, he is a very solid tight end option. And I would actually think that he is a higher quality of tight end that they've had in a long time. He's probably the best since Heath Miller as well. But what I'm thinking here, Michael, bear with me on this. Let's combine stats.
Okay.
The reason I'm going to combine stats is because if you look at everything, you look around this team, stats are going to go down. You're not going to have the sexy stats with a guy you're not going to have Antonio Brown type numbers with a guy. You don't need to have one guy getting everything and the others hoping to get some numbers and looking down, because you take one of these guys, put them on another team, they're going to do so much better. With Ben Roethlisberger having 4 really good receivers, another one in Ryan Switzer that he trusts, he's going to have to spread some balls around. Not everybody's going to be happy. Not everybody's going to be over 1,000 yards. But if you have 5 guys between the ranges of 700 and 1,200, somewhere there, some are going to be lower, some are going to be higher, you're going to have a great receiving stable there. So Juju's numbers are not going to be 1,300. Deontay Johnson's aren't going to be 1,300 as well. Deontay might not be over, but if you get 900 and you get 12 from Juju, maybe, I mean, I'm just spitballing. James Washington gets 600 or 700. Chase Claypool gets 500 or 600 as a rookie. And then the tight ends are getting theirs. You're doing well. So what do you think about stats as far before we get into the combination here?
Yeah, when you take things into consideration, I think we can safely say there's no way this team's going above 5,000 passing yards. If that's the benchmark, even a completely healthy Ben, he just does what he does in 2018. When you factor in all those names, especially when you consider his love of Ryan Switzer under the middle, who will pick up probably a couple hundred yards if he does what he did a few years ago. It's hard to imagine that there's going to be a ton of 1,000-yard receivers. There might be 1, there might be 2, but I think you're going to see a lot of guys floating around that 700-yard range just because there's so many balls to go around. There's just not going to be those opportunities. But I think when it comes to tight end specifically, we saw it last year. They should have been used more. Of course, giving up that 5th-round pick for Mr. Nick Vannett, which was a complete waste now that he just left for nothing. When you're looking at a year ago when they seriously could have used those tight ends, they didn't. If that's a game plan thing or if that's just a mistrust thing with the QBs, it was a little frustrating to me when watching this team. Like, they have 2 tight ends that I think they obviously believe in because they're using them a lot. Of course, Vance was hurt in and out of the lineup, but Vannett wasn't getting the ball. They were not throwing these guys the ball. So if they cannot build that trust up, or if Randy Fichtner's not going to call any plays that are kind of designed to go to the tight end, it's easy to imagine a world where their stats aren't as great as we can expect them to be.
And why would that matter, Michael Beck? And the reason I'm asking that question is you look at teams that have running back by committee and they're making the Super Bowl, they're winning the Super Bowl. You don't always have to have a 1,000-yard rusher to get in there. That's what I'm saying. So if you have a lot of high-end numbers, but they're not glamorous Pro Bowl numbers, who cares if you're winning a ring? And this is a team that could win a ring as a team and not having just divas.
Right.
So that's what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree, especially with this defense. It's almost like we just have to do enough, protect the ball. We have the weapons. If we want to score on every single drive, we can, but we don't have to force the ball. So I think the combination of how good this defense is and what they're going to limit opposing offenses to do, and then how good this offense can be in the sense of they could really just hold on the ball, take some time off the clock. I think the combination of the two, this team should be competing for a ring. If they don't, I feel like this is completely on coaching, or Ben's elbow is just completely shot, and they pooched it and they didn't find someone good enough, or Mason Rudolph didn't continue to develop as a backup. So it will be interesting, but the combination of the O and D, they should be a team that's really one to reckon with in 2020 here.
That is definite, Michael, that they could be one to be reckoned with. I'm glad that's something you mentioned. But the reason being, and I always talk about the team concept, and if this is looking a lot more like a Team Kumbaya, and we talked about Team Kumbaya a lot last year. This could be a team that is together. And I think that they value production from players, but knowing where it's coming from. Look, you don't have to have that 1,000-yard season. You just have to be producing the touchdowns, and you have to be making it happen. And that's something that I really think they're going to do. So if you look at that, that goes into my theory that the combination of two tight ends to make one super tight end is really what you have to look at as stats. A lot of people don't realize this, but if we go back to 2018 and look at Jesse James, who nobody's going to mistake for an all-pro, but he was very solid, and people always talk about, hey, will Jesse James come back after 1 year in Detroit? People were talking about that this year. If he's available, would the Steelers bring him back? At this point, no. But, hey, they've done that in the past. You could see that actually. I could see that actually happening maybe in 2021 if Vance does not re-sign with the team. But what I'm looking at here is if you combine Jesse James and Vance McDonald from 2018, their numbers, the Steelers had one 1,000-yard receiver and almost 100 catches. So let's look at these numbers. You had Jesse giving you 430 yards. 43 yards, 43 touchdowns.
43 touchdowns.
Yards. Oh my gosh. I'm really.
You must have been up at 2 a.m. last night.
Yeah, trust me, it wasn't that good. I'm just a boring married guy now. Let's try this again. He had 43 catches, 423 yards, 2 touchdowns, 43. That would have been a record. He's not going anywhere. You combine that with Vance McDonald. And Vance McDonald had 72. He had 72 targets, 50 receptions. So that's 93 receptions between the two, 610. That's 1,033 yards and 4 touchdowns. So that's 6. So what you're looking at here, at this point, you're looking at 1,033 yards, 6 touchdowns, 93 receptions. If you're getting that out of your tight end, that's pretty good. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 guys, as long as your tight end is giving you those kind of numbers. And there's no reason here, in my mind, that Ebron and Vance can't do that together if they're healthy. What are you thinking?
A healthy year between the two. I feel like there'll be a lot of touchdowns, but those games missed, I feel like that stat is going to be one that actually is one that we might overlook, because both these guys haven't proven that they're going to make it through 16 games. Well, I know Ebron's done it in the past, but coming off a pretty substantial ankle surgery, which halfway through the year, he wasn't cleared until like 2 weeks ago, I want to say. So it's going to be a factor. And then Vance, obviously in and out of the lineup. If they both make it through the year, could they combine for 1,000 yards? I feel like that's possible, just based on Ebron being more of a receiver than he is a tight end. He's just really, really big. But I feel like the stats are probably going to be similar to what we saw from Jesse and Vance. But the only thing is, can they be healthy? Can they make it through that? If they do, then sure. I feel like they'll do all right. But with the targets, what we talked about earlier, I think Vance is someone who's going to take the hit. I think he's someone that probably won't see a ton of targets, just based on how they're going to rotate their players. If they're having 5 on the field, Vance isn't going to be out there. If they're running their heavy sets, he might just be someone who's used more as a blocker. So I feel like the person who's most likely to take these statistic hits is Vance McDonald, and he's in the last year of his contract. If he doesn't put up, he's not coming back next year. So I think he could, interestingly enoug, be one of those guys that just kind of fades into oblivion in 2020. If that's the case, then maybe it's just Ebron stats. He might do what Nick Van Nett did a year ago, which I believe was in the neighborhood of 12 receptions, 133 yards over 16 games on both the Seahawks and Steelers combined. If he does that, then I feel like everyone's just going to be, I couldn't imagine the internet, because they will be complaining, get this guy out of town, do not re-sign him. So if he's a guy that takes that hit, I think the stats are going to be deflated a bit. I could see a world where the combined stat total is right around 500 yards, but I still see just kind of what they can do in the red zone. I could see them floating around 10 touchdowns. So that's what you bring Ebron in for. But a lot of drops and a fewer receptions and yards than I think we should relatively expect from them.
I'm glad you said that, Michael, because I could not agree with you less. And I'm so glad, because it's the Homer and the Hater show. We need to disagree on this, but we don't have to. Just because it's named that show, we don't have to disagree. But I just disagree with you for a few reasons. And I saw it on the live chat before you said it. And then you said it about how unhealthy Vance McDonald has been with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, the first season that Vance McDonald was with the Steelers, you got to give a guy a little bit of a pass. He only played 10 games for the Steelers. He came in right at the end of he came in via trade with the San Francisco 49ers 2 days before the last preseason game. And we have seen this over the years, especially with Ben Roethlisberger. You bring a guy in that does not have a full training camp with him, you don't have that rapport. Towards the end of that 2017 season, especially in that playoff game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he was a force. He had over 10 catches in that game against Jacksonville. You could tell that the rapport was there. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you got to give him a pass on that. Let's look at 2018 and 2019. How many games do you think he had combined? How many games do you think he missed?
I believe he missed, I want to say 6 a year ago, and then I think 1 the year before. So I think he's floating around 25 games there.
You're correct on 2018. He played 15. He appeared in 14 games in 2019.
Didn't feel like it really did not
so
feel
a
like
lot
it.
of people, because there were a lot of games, there were a lot of weeks leading up to games where you didn't know whether he was playing, and he was on the injured list, but he ended up playing in those games, and he was active for those games. And you got to think, when Ben went out in week 2 against the Seahawks, Mason Rudolph comes in. He had 2 touchdowns in that game. He looked really good, but then things fell off. And I don't know if it was due to him. I don't think it was due to him. I think it was due to the unrest at that quarterback position and no rapport. Usually your tight end does help you out, but in this situation, he didn't. Vanette was brought in, and Vanette had no rapport either. It seems like he is a disgruntled guy. He was disgruntled in Seattle. He was disgruntled in his time with Pittsburgh. There was really, with this situation, it was he never got on track, and he was never really targeted. So that could be the result of not having an offensive coordinator last year, when your offensive coordinator has his elbow in a sling, because that's it. Randy Fichtner did not know how to get guys involved last year, and I said it all last year, and I'm going to continue to say it this year. You have your offensive coordinator back because you didn't have him with Randy Land because he was overmatched. He was brought in because Ben Roethlisberger wanted him to come in and get the position, because Ben, I don't want to say he knew he could boss him around, but Ben was comfortable with him and knew that he could play his game and not have the clash like he did with a hard-headed Todd Haley. So that's really why he was brought in. That position was never posted. It was just one thing. All right, we're moving this guy in. They didn't even consider anybody else. You moved your quarterback coach in, and that was to take care of your quarterback. When your quarterback goes down, you are at a huge disadvantage. And that's what happened with the Randy Fichtner situation. So a lot of stats, offensive stats that fell off last year, I mean, they are due to a lot of things. They are due to the fact that the quarterback goes down and you have two untested quarterbacks in there. You have the fact that there are injuries involved also with Juju, James Conner, with even McDonald, a lot of different things. And you have the fact that you have, I don't want to call him an inept play caller, but a guy that was overmatched last year. And that's the bottom line, and I can't say it enough. But you still have a team that was in a position with all those factors to make it into the playoffs the last 3 weeks of the season, the last 2 weeks of the season, and even with some help the last week of the season. And they could not get in because they lost all 3 of those games. 3 games that they really would have won if they had another quarterback in there. 3 games that they might have even won. They would have at least won 1 or 2 with Mason Rudolph in there as well. I can honestly say that in my mind, that's what I think. So when you're looking at that, you can't count 2019 too much, and you got to take it with a grain of salt statistically, because this is a new year with Ben Roethlisberger at his healthiest. If he is, then you're going to have a whole lot more as far as stats. And the way I'm looking at this with Vance and Ebron together, they should definitely be above 1,000 yards. They should be pretty close to 100 catches. And to go against your point, if they can come pretty close to those numbers with Jesse James in there, who does not hold a candle to Eric Ebron as far as a receiver, and Vance McDonald, who I thought was the better receiver, then you're going to you find a way to mix them in, and Ben Roethlisberger knows how to mix those guys in so much more, then you're going to have a healthy tight end situation as far as stats go, combining them into one.
Right. No, in that sense, completely agree. If they're able to juice up that productivity, if they're healthy, they should be able to do some stuff. But again, I am super concerned about that health factor. If this is one of the huge things, is pretty much everyone on that offense here missed a game, missed a half, they were in and out. So maybe Matt Canada's influence, maybe you see a little bit of motion. These guys bump around a little bit. Maybe you see Eric Ebron line up out wide. To your point, Big Ben is a huge influence on this offense, not only bringing guys in, but the distribution of this ball. If it's up to him, he'll throw 650 times in 2020, which probably wouldn't be a good thing for his elbow, depending on what it was. I guess we'll never know what the surgery really is, and maybe after he retires, he might spill the beans. But do you really want that much wear and tear on that elbow over the course of one season and then possibly the playoffs? Could he have just a wet noodle of an arm? I don't know if that's what you want. So I think we desperately want to get those running backs more involved than the tight ends. I think we're going to have to get those guys more involved in the blocking game, and use of decoy should be also one of those super important factors. Just because if Ben's throwing that much, I think it wouldn't be a good thing for this team. They should be winning a lot of these games, 21-10, 21-17. If they were putting up 21 points a year ago, they probably win at least 11 games, if that's what it came down to. So with Ben coming in, I think that's going to be enough. But will these tight ends be the focal point of the offense? I don't think so. I think this receiving core is just too good, and I think they're going to have to hand off the ball, if so, even more than they did last year, and hopefully pick up some more first downs, because that was one of the biggest issues, especially in that first possession of the game. So I'm hopeful that this tight end core can be better, but I'm not holding my breath on it.
Okay, let's wrap up the tight end talk with this last question, Michael. Let's go ahead and put, desired totals for each guy. Let's start with Eric Ebron and then go to Vance McDonald. And I'd like to have your opinion. How many, let's just say, let's forget about catches. Let's talk more about yards.
Okay.
And let's talk more about touchdowns as well. One thing that, before we get into that, one thing that we did not discuss a lot is moving the chains and first downs. And the tight end position, especially Ben to Heath Miller, was paramount in getting first downs that were so much more important in my mind than touchdowns at that point. Because it was keeping the offense on the field, and the tight end was doing that at that point. So that's a statistical category we can look at in the future as well as being very important. And that's what the tight end position does. And that's what these guys do as well. But desired stats for these two guys, Michael.
All right. So Eric Ebron's career high in receiving yards is 750. If he can pull that off again, that would be an outstanding year. But with the weapons around, when he did on the Colts, I think he was obviously their number 2 target behind T.Y. Hilton. So is he going to be that high on this offense? No. So I think we'll see him float probably closer to 600 yards. If he can put up double-digit touchdowns, it would break the record for a tight end, which was Heath Miller with 8. I think that's what he's been brought in to do. So I think we're going to look. If he can put up those double digits, this team's going to be in a really good place, potentially even leading the AFC North. And considering who's in it, that would be quite the accomplishment. So out of Eric Ebron, if he can be float around 50 to 60 receptions, floating around 600 yards and putting up 10 touchdowns, I think that would be an outstanding year for the tight end. But I could also see a world where he's closer to 40 receptions, because that's kind of typically where the Steelers tight ends come in around. I could see him on the lower end flirting with 500, 400, 500 yards, somewhere in that range, and somewhere around 6 touchdowns. Sure, that would be a fine season, but that's not really what you want out of an Eric Ebron type. On the flip side with Vance McDonald, I still think he's going to suffer a little bit. I do believe his career highs, he set them all in 2018 with the Steelers. Let me pull up the stats here. So his career high years was 50 receptions, 610 yards, and those 4 touchdowns. I don't think he's going to come anywhere near that. And I think what he did kind of a year ago is something he probably will come in replicating again, somewhere around 35 receptions, around 300 yards, and a couple touchdowns here and there. It's kind of hard to say someone with that frame isn't going to get looks in the red zone, but considering the guys that are around, I think there's just better options down there. And he's not scoring those 80-yard touchdowns. That one against Chris Conti, that went down the sideline against the Bucs. I think that's an anomaly, just an amazing play he made. I'm not expecting that in 2020. So I could see the combined totals. I think Ebron's going to be on the higher side of what I said. So, and Vance right around that 275 yards. So I think they're going to float roughly around 900 total yards, around 12 touchdowns, and somewhere in the neighborhood of like 85 to 95 receptions, which would be really good. But I don't quite see them doing as well as Jesse and Vance did in 2018. But I think the touchdown totals will be a little bit more. The yards maybe a little bit less, and receptions kind of around par of what they did in 2018.
Well, that was definitely a thought out answer, and I appreciate that. I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm saying let's just average each guy at 10 yards per reception. So I'm just copping out with that. So let's just go ahead with 65 catches, 650 yards, 7 touchdowns for Ebron, 45 catches, 450 yards, 3 to 4 touchdown catches for Vance McDonald. That gives you 11 touchdown catches. That gives you 1,100 yards and 110 catches. And that's going to break that record as a duo. And I think that's really where you need to be. You don't have to be at 750 for Ebron because of the weapons around him. If he becomes your number 1 weapon, then you're going to have problems because you need the tight end to be a complement to the wide receivers. You need him to be a red zone weapon, but you don't need him to be leading this team in yards. So as far as that goes, I really think that the tight end position is going to be very lucrative for the Steelers this year, very productive as well. But the one thing you need to look at is games played. And I'm thinking if you average 14 games between the two of them, so you have a 14 from each. You take off four games, two each, 4 games total, and then you're still gonna be in pretty good shape because one of them will get to carry the load for the other, and there's still weapons around.
Yeah, no, I agree with the sentiment there. I think if they can be healthy, their numbers obviously are going to be a lot better. But if they're dinged up throughout the year, I'm concerned. I feel like each and every week, if you see Vance and Ebron on that injury report week in, week out, they're going to suffer. And if is Zach Gentry going to enter games, that could be a factor. Is he getting the ball? No. Is he blocking? Yes. So what's going to go on there? Like if there's a little bit of issues with their health, it's going to be a humongous factor heading into 2020. And again, I just cannot see them putting up these crazy stats with who is already around them in this offense. I think there's some names that are going to demand the ball. I think Deontay is someone who's going to really take the bull by the horns this year, and Juju, I think he's going to bounce back a bit. Moving back into the slot seems like a certainty, and of course, him playing with Ben throws him open so frequently. I think this receiving core is going to boom a bit, and this tight end is going to bust a bit, just based on health and who is really kind of the focal point, especially in Big Ben's eyes.
Great points, all. So let's go ahead and go to questions. We've asked for them in the live chat, and we have a few. So let's go rapid fire. I'm going to read the questions, and I'm going to throw them to you, Michael, and I might throw in my 2 cents if it's worth. I don't know what my 2 cents is worth in Canada.
About $7, I think.
Okay. Oh, well, thanks. That's making me feel really good. So here, let's start with Nathaniel Zarate. Are these next 2 years Super Bowl or bust?
Like our editor Dave Schofield says, this team isn't in win now; it's win always. But especially with Big Ben, if these are his last 2 seasons, absolutely they're gunning for the Super Bowl. But they gun for the Super Bowl every single year. I think especially these next 2 years, because you don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be in 2022. I think these 2 years are ones that you're going to see this team with their best odds in a while. If they find a quarterback, they draft one that's absolutely cheap. That's 5 years where you're not paying a quarterback $40 to $50 million is what we're going to see moving forward here, especially with the Mahomes and Jackson deals coming through the pipeline. I think, of course, these are Super Bowl years where they should be contenders. And then moving forward, if they can find someone, they will continue being contenders. But finding someone's going to be a challenge. You don't just find a franchise quarterback year in, year out.
So let me go ahead and take this statement because I agree with you. I agree with Dave Schofield to a point. So if I just go ahead and change this statement, then I think that we could all agree that that's what we're looking at. Are these next 2 years Super Bowl or keep trying? And that's what I think. Instead of bust, let's say keep trying, because I agree with Dave that they're never stopping. But with these free agent acquisitions and the trade, bringing in Chris Wormley as well, they brought guys in. Most of these deals were, the biggest one was a 3-year deal. The other two was Newski and Ebron, 2-year deals. I believe there's 1 year left on on Wormley's contract as well. Maybe 2, but I think only 1.
1 year.
So with that being said, that fits in the Super Bowl window, that 2-year window with Ben Roethlisberger. And I think that's what they're building for now, but they're not hamstringing themselves for the future. So that's why bust is out the window, so they can keep on forging on. They're not killing themselves beyond 2021. So in 2022, they're not making moves right now that they're just dead after 2022. But you are right. They will need that franchise quarterback. Let's go to Dave Shipley. Do we score more than 3 points on our first possession?
Total throughout the year, I think so. I saw another one earlier talking about over under for points on opening possessions. I feel like you should set it 27.5. That's only what, 6 if it's 3 field goals, 3 touchdowns. That's only 4 scores. I think this team can do it with Big Ben at quarterback. Obviously, they're going to be a lot better offensively. So I think we're definitely going to see a little bit more than 3 points. Like I think we had 6 a year ago. So expect a lot more on that opening possession because it can't get much worse.
Thanks, Dave. Great contributor to the show. Another great one, Kriakis. What will be the distribution between the wide receiver, tight end, and running back? That might be that's a tough one.
It definitely is. I like if I could do it in a percentage. I think the wide receivers are going to get more than 50%. I think they're going to get probably right around that 55 to 60% range. I think the running backs are going to be coming in right around 30%, 35%, and that remaining 10, 15% going to the tight ends. Okay,
we're getting some criticism here from the chief here. If this is rapid fire, I'd hate to see what the alternative would be.
We move slow in Canada. It's cold. Like it just rolls. It's just a snowball effect, literally. So I'm sorry. I'll speed it up.
You're good. Keep those questions coming in, everybody. We definitely appreciate them. So I had to go ahead, and I lost where I was. We have a $5 super chat, and we thank Dave Shipley, a great contributor. What's the over and under on points scored on first possession? And once again, thank you, $5 going to the tip jar. If you want to get your question to the head of the queue, to the top of the line, to the top of the mountain, you can go ahead and support our show with a super chat like Dave did. What's the over and under on points scored on first possession?
Right. Like I was saying under that before, rather, that I'd say that 27.5. 4 scores, 4 extra points, some field goals, some touchdowns. I think 27.5 is a good number.
Alfred asks, will Ebron be lining up a tight end off the tackles? I don't think so. I think Fichtner will be using him out wide a little bit less than 50% of the time than having his hand in the dirt. Michael, what are your thoughts?
I don't think he'll ever have his hand in the dirt except for here and there, but he seems like a guy who's lining up in the slot or lining up in that kind of wing spot just off the line of scrimmage. I don't think you'll ever see. That's not the player he is. He's not a blocking tight end. Hand up in the slot. I think that's where you'll see him.
So we've got another comment / question from Alfred. Isn't Pittsburgh starting to look like San Francisco last year? Returning quarterback, stable of running backs, new pass catchers with a really good tight end, scary defense, and generally a team that underperformed.
Absolutely. I think their defense was unbelievable last year. Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think he can hold a candle to Big Ben. So I think in a way the Steelers are primed for even more. Another factor is both teams have a great head coach. I love Kyle Shanahan. I think he's one of the great offensive minds right now in football. So I think Mike Tomlin and his defensive prowess, and especially with everything you've listed, it's basically almost exactly the same to a T, just with a better quarterback. So I'm super excited to see what this Steelers team can do, especially in comparison to what the Niners did in their flipping of the script a year ago.
You know, I definitely really like this comparison. And Alfred, I did not think of this. So there you go. That's something that I'm probably going to steal from you and overuse in the next couple of weeks, months, and the entire 2020 season. So thank you. Let's go ahead and bring in a new contributor to BTSC on the written word side, Thaddeus Kennedy. What stat would equal more wins for this offense? 1,400 yards rushing by Connor or 1,400 yards receiving by Juju Smith-Schuster?
I almost don't even want to let you finish because I think if James Conner's putting up 1,400 rushing yards, this deserves a holy smokes, because this team, holy smokes, would they be doing so good if they had a 1,400-yard rusher and the other weapons? Yeah, no, the Steelers, they'd be flirting with 14, 15 wins. They would be legit if Conner's putting up 1,400 rushing yards.
Okay, you've already disagreed with this, and this isn't a question, it's a comment. But another great another great contributor is Ezra Nehemiah. Ebron will be the first Steeler to get double-digit TDs. Mark the tape. Your thoughts on that?
No, I might have to tag freezing cold takes, but you know what? If he is good as he was in 2018, and same with Big Ben, yeah, no, like I think it's believable that he could do it, but there's so many mouths to feed. You have to keep in mind how many guys are going to demand touchdowns and how many are they going to score. If they score 50 touchdowns, 60 touchdowns, there's still a lot of mouths to be fed. I can't see everyone putting up 10 TDs, so that's going to be really tough. I don't see it quite that high, but he'll be close.
So King Hutchinson, I'd like to have you comment on his comment here. Guaranteed Super Bowl this year.
I would love that, but you know what? Considering who's in the AFC, they got to knock off Baltimore in the AFC North, and then they got to knock off the Chiefs. They're still not paying Pat Mahomes, so they're bringing back pretty much the same roster. So getting through the AFC is going to be even harder than just winning the Super Bowl. This is going to be a real challenge, but I think they're primed to make a push. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Okay, here's another comment here. Todd Christian, Red Zone, Claypool, Ebron, and McDonald. So I'm going to throw a question on there. Who's the most important in the red zone among these three players?
Of those three, you can make an argument that it could be Vance, because he's someone who's going to be in there blocking and freeing some stuff up for some other guys. But I love seeing these guys in a diamond set, all three of them lining up, bunched up tight. That would be pretty dangerous. But I think because Claypool's a rookie, and he obviously not having those rookie camps, those mini camps, it's going to suffer a little bit from that. I think in 2020 it's Ebron. If all these guys are back in 2021, I'd say Chase Claypool.
Says, would it be disappointing if we don't win the Super Bowl? Actually, he asks, not says.
It's disappointing every year when they don't, but
I agree.
It's still Baltimore's division until we can knock them off. So if we can cross that hurdle, then absolutely. If the Steelers win the AFC North, I'd be devastated if they couldn't even at least play in the game.
Doc Holliday, 30 sacks between Watt and Dupree.
I think Watt takes another big step this year. I think he breaks James Harrison's 16 sacks in a season record. If he's coming in around 17, is Dupree going to crack 13? Probably not, just because this defense is so filthy. They're going to be competing for sacks. Guys are going to be beating each other. The quarterback. I think it'll be closer to 28, so close to 30. But I think that's because TJ Watt absolutely explodes.
And I'm going to bring this up. I like this. Richard McKinney. I see that most of you all Yankees don't think with your minds in not seeing Mason Rudolph as a starter after Ben retires. And I got to tell you, that's still a possibility. And if Mason Rudolph earns his way to being a starter, in my eyes, I'm fine with it, because that means he has jumped up. At the end of last season, I was begging for Mason Rudolph to be back in the lineup, because I really think if he would have remained healthy against the Jets, I really think, and I was at the Buffalo game, and I think if he was in that Buffalo game, that they win the Buffalo game with Mason Rudolph. So I'm going to go ahead and say that, and I got to say, with Michael not being a Yankee. With you being a Canuck, is that what you guys call yourselves, Canucks, or what would you call yourself? Because Yankees are a nickname, and
no, I think the flip side would be Canuck on that, which nodded the wrong way with the Canucks merch on the wall there. But nationwide, I think Canucks are pretty much the equivalent of Yankee. Yeah.
I looked at this question before in a different capacity, but does a great year by the tight ends take away from what we think will be a redemption year for Juju? Less balls going to him.
Yes, but I think the less balls are going to end up going to the tight end. You know what? Sure, that would be great, but you got to remember, Lamar Jackson's probably the most freaky athlete in the NFL right now. I would love to keep him contained. They did that when he was in Pittsburgh, when they played that one game. So I'd love to see it, but you got to do it consistently.
I'd love to see it too, but here's the thing. I don't think Lamar has any fear. And I think that's what makes him as good as he is, the fact that he's fearless there, that could be a downfall too. But so I'd love for him to be able to have having him a little antsy. But as far as that goes, I'm also looking at the fact that if he plays reckless, which I can actually say that he does play reckless. And if a Lamar Jackson has the confidence to run and he gets cracked because he thinks he could keep on doing what he has to do and that he's invincible, then he will get cracked and it will cost them. So that's what I'm hoping. But with all of that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the Homer and the Hater show. Michael was quasi-homer, quasi-hater this week. And me, I'm always a homer. So there you go. But we will have Lance Williams back on the show next week. Michael Beck, as always, thank you so much for filling in. We will be seeing you once again on the Steeler Preview. We might have some more interviews coming up, but I would be remiss if I didn't say fantastic job on the Chris Wormley interview, you and Dave Schofield last Monday night. Having an opportunity to bring a current Steeler, Chris Wormley, on the show. He was absolutely fantastic as well. Thank you for getting that together, and keep on beating those phone lines to get these great guys in here.
Oh, we will. And make sure, if you haven't watched already, guys in the chat there, make sure to, once we sign out here, make sure to watch that. Great stuff from Chris. What an awesome guy. Make sure you watch that if you haven't already.
All right. For Michael Beck, my name is Brian Anthony Davis from Behind the Steel Curtain. Thank you so much. We cannot do this show without everybody in the live chat and everybody that listens to us on the platform, on all of our family of podcasts here at BTSC. So thank you. We value you. We love you. You make us run, and we've got great appreciation. So with that being said, thank you one more time. For Michael Beck, my name is Brian Anthony Davis. You could call me bad, and this was the Homer and the Hater show for this week in June. We will talk to you next week. Have a great day. Have a great Steeler thought in your head, and take care of each other. God bless.